Welcome everyone to the 32-team franchise. As you can see on the screen and as the title of this video, we're going to look at the head coaching records throughout the history of my league. So of course I had to remove people who were coaches currently. As you can see, the only one I've played with that's in the top 10 or top 7 there is Dan Reeves at 188 wins. I only had him for about 2 seasons with the Falcons. Schottenheimer makes the top 10 all time. Holmgren was 157 with Seattle. Just didn't win as much with him as I may have expected. I know Holmgren had 161 career wins in his real life. Parcells, 153. We see Belichick climbing his way. He's at 152 wins in his career. Good for him. Mike Shanahan, 150. Tom Coughlin's over there with the 130. He's working his way up that second column within the top 20 head coaches of all time. Then we see Tony Dungy, who is retired. He's at 128. Jim Fassel, who would not have been here in the top 38, had a lot of success with the New York Giants, with Matt Schaub, with Terrell Owens, making it to his career. He made 3 Super Bowls, and he lost all 3. Andy Reid is climbing. We see Jeff Fisher had a little stall because he got fired from the Titans job. He's been a coordinator for a little bit. And then Norv Turner cracks the 100 mark with 101. Dave Ronstadt with 101. And then we'll see which other coaches are able to crack 100 wins in their career. But now for the divisional breakdown. Let's see. The first division is the AFC North with the Cincinnati Bengals. The ones in purple there are coaches that I have coached, that I have used in my franchise. So already Marvin Lewis, he is the all-time Bengals coach leader with the 70 wins and 64 losses, 52%. Unlike the real Marvin Lewis, he does have a winning, or he has won a playoff game. Not super impressive, but still he's done it. And then Dick LeBeau, I think I did about this. Yeah, I was 1 game better than him in real life. I won 1 more than the real Cincinnati Bengals under Dick LeBeau. Now we move on to the Cleveland Browns. As you can see, they have 4 different head coaches. They had Butch Davis, who started out. He ended up being 20 and 28. I guess in real life he did a little bit better, but he also had 1 more season in real life as opposed to the extra year I cut him off and fired him. Then, of course, they had Bill Cowher from 04 to 06. I thought Cowher might have had an opportunity to transform the Browns, but with Kerry Collins and later Charlie Fry, the team just did not come through. I mean, they had Plaxico Burress. I believe they had Randall L. at one point. They brought in some Steeler players, and they just did not do well. They weren't able to be as successful. And so Cowher only has a 17 and 33 record with the Browns. After him, it was Eric Mangini, and this was Eric Mangini's first time as a head coach. He did not go to the Jets first. He went to Cleveland first. And in 2007 through 2009, he only won 19 games and was fired. So, of course, we did bring in Mike Holmgren a year early. Holmgren stuck it out for, I think, 1 year with Mangini, and then brought in Jim Tressel, the Ohio State head coach. And Tressel had 1 season, went 6-11, only 35% win there. We will see if Jim Tressel is able to turn this Cleveland Browns team around. Then we have the Baltimore Ravens, a very young franchise, of course. We see Brian Billick still being the #1 head coach of all time. I had 6 fewer wins than Billick did, but I also fired him a year early. Then we see Jim Schwartz, who had about 7, 8, 9, 3 years with the Baltimore Ravens. Unfortunately, he was unable to get through the Jamarcus Russell years. They weren't very successful as a team. They went, let's see, their record with Schwartz was 8-9, 6-11, 7-10, 8-9, 6-11. And then Al Saunders came in with the 7-10 season this past year. Al Saunders likely moving forward with them. We'll see if the Ravens can finally get back to the playoffs. They have not been to the playoffs since 2005 with Brian Billick. And so we'll see if the Ravens are able to turn their franchise around. And then we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. And right now Bill Cowher did not win a Super Bowl with Pittsburgh. So despite being there for that long, he was let go after several losing seasons. He was 5-11 and 6-10. And I know Pittsburgh normally doesn't fire their coaches, but in this instance they did. And so they decided that the culture wasn't right, and so they moved on from Cowher. They bring in Lovie Smith, who is on his way of to being Pittsburgh's maybe an all-time great head coach there. He's already won 2 Super Bowls on his own, so he has won the equivalent of Bill Cowher and Mike Tomlin Super Bowls combined in only a few years. I mean, it's been pretty impressive for Lovie Smith. Now we move on to the Indianapolis Colts. As you can see, we have Tony Dungy, who is the head coach till 2008. Bill Cowher, who bounced around from Pittsburgh to Cleveland, was retired for a bit, but then decided to come back in Tony Dungy's absence, trying to win a Super Bowl for himself, since he has never won a Super Bowl. Now we will see if he's ever able to do that, because right now it has not been very successful for him. And so, he's made the playoffs both times. He's had decent success with the Colts in these last 2 years. But I don't know if the Colts are on track for winning another Super Bowl. They always had the potential to. They were in the AFC Championship game. But right now, the New England Patriots are just so on fire that I'm not sure if... And also, I don't know if I will use Peyton Manning next year. Because Peyton Manning, I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to give him the neck injury that takes him out for the year. So with that in consideration, Cowher might be kind of in a really weird spot. As for the Jacksonville Jaguars, we see Thomas Coughlin, who was there an extra year for me, right? So Tom Coughlin was there, or extra 2 years. He was there until 2002 in real life, whereas in mine, he was there until 2004. Has about a 50% win success. He's 80-81. They brought in Kevin Gilbride, who was the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills when they won the Super Bowl with Drew Bledsoe. And so he ended up coming in as their head coach, was there for a couple years, only 18-33. Not very successful in his 3 years as head coach. And then, of course, we had Wade Phillips coming in at the 2008 season. And so there you see 21-30. Wade Phillips has made the playoffs. He made the playoffs 2 years ago. Last year he was 8-9, just missed the playoffs. But he really got a resurgence by signing David Carr. So David Carr went from Houston to the Jaguars and has given them their first playoff appearance in a long time. Then we have the Houston Texans. As you can see, only 2 head coaches there, Gary Kubiak and Dom Capers. Dom Capers won them a Super Bowl. Kubiak has had more years with the team. However, that may be short-lived. Next, we have the Tennessee Titans, that Tennessee team, the Houston Oilers team. You can see that Jeff Fisher is the top head coach of their franchise history, but Pep Hamilton is working his way. Pep Hamilton was an interesting hire because he did really well with Alex Smith and the Jets as their OC, but he was 10-7, 9-8 his first 2 years making the playoffs, and then he went 8-9. And so he has been doing well as a head coach. I mean, he's definitely one of the younger head coaches in the league, finding ways to get that opportunity to be a coach of a franchise. We'll see if the Titans are able to maintain, especially transitioning into Madden 24, where Kevin O'Connell might not be as a surprisingly talented QB as he's shown this past year. Now we're up to the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo in the East, you can see the Super Bowl victory by Greg Williams. He was there from 2001 to 2007, had a 48% win percentage. What really tanked his career was when he traded away Bledsoe to the Saints. They traded up to Cleveland's pick to get Matt Leinart. And, of course, Matt Leinart did not pay off for the Buffalo Bills. And despite that, even the New Orleans Saints, who acquired Drew Bledsoe, didn't have any success with Bledsoe. And then the Browns, I think, drafted, maybe it was Cameron Wimbley or whoever. And so no one won that trade. And no one really lost the trade because it was just kind of a weird situation. But what could have been if Drew Bledsoe stayed with Buffalo? Could Greg Williams have continued to win with Bledsoe as opposed to switching to a younger, less proven quarterback? And then Mike Munchak was expected to be fired this year. He did not have a good year up until he got rid of Josh Freeman in the after the first 3 games and decided to replace him with Bruce Gradkowski, who did get Buffalo into the playoffs. However, it was a very short-lived playoff run. They were not really that great of a team, but they did have a surprising turnaround. So because of the playoff appearance, he was not fired. But he does stand there at 25-26. We will see if he's able to kind of distance that 50-50 kind of record. Then we have the Miami Dolphins. As you can see, Shula will probably stay the all-time coach leader. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get 257 wins in this franchise, especially after having 2 coaches who did have a decent tenure. I mean, they each had about 5 years. We see Dave Wannstedt, who I think I did better with Dave Wannstedt than in real life, seeing as Wannstedt had 1 less year in real life than in my franchise. He was a 58% win in real life, whereas my win success was 66% with Dave Wannstedt. He was 11-5, 8-8, 11-5, 9-8, and he got fired after a 9-8 season because he missed the playoffs. And they decided to bring in the fiery coach Herm Edwards. Now Herm, he started out great because he had Steve McNair at quarterback, and he went 11-6 and 10-7, both times reaching the playoffs. But then Herm Edwards went 8-9, 8-9, and this year was 4-13. Definitely likely being on the chopping block as we head into this offseason. Now we move into the New York Jets. Now the Jets, as you can see, they have Weeb Ebank as their number 1 guy, Joe Walton second, but Mike McCarthy from 05 to 09 ended up getting 40 wins, putting him at 3rd all-time in the Jets' history. Herm Edwards started out as my coach, right? He was 2001 to 2004, but unlike the real Herm Edwards, he did not get as many wins. He wasn't doing as much success with the Jets. And so the Jets had an extra year with him than I did, but my percentage win was 42%. In real life, he was 49%. And so they started out where the Jets had all this talent with Chad Pennington and so many other unique players that they just didn't win, though. They were 7-9, 7-9, 3-13. And that 3-13 year is when Mike McCarthy was hired, and they drafted Alex Smith, number 1 overall, to replace Chad Pennington. And Pennington has bounced around the league, and now he's basically out of the league, whereas Alex Smith is probably 2nd or 3rd best QB in the league. It was him and Brady, both X factors in this division, really lighting it up for the past few seasons. But McCarthy, he was 8-9, 8-9, 11-6, made the playoffs, 7-10, 6-11. So he didn't have as much success despite Alex Smith being MVP of the league. And so Todd Haley stepped in. He went 11-6 in his first year, made it to the divisional round, only losing to the Patriots, who did win the Super Bowl. But Todd Haley also witnessed Clinton Portis becoming the league MVP. So the Jets have had Alex Smith and Clinton Portis win MVP and have not been able to really come away with anything other than a playoff victory or 2 playoff appearances in the last 9 years, with 1 real victory there. Then we have the New England Patriots. So there's nothing changing here. It's all Bill Belichick. Now, I'm just working my way with Belichick. I don't know if I'll get to 262, but we'll see. But I'll keep climbing. I'm at a 64% win as opposed to a 71%, so that's a little bit disappointing. But they're still very successful. It's just the first 2 years, like 02 and 03 was 7-9, 9-7, both missing the playoffs. But then he went 13-3 and won Coach of the Year. Then 10-7, 11-6, 10-7, 14-3, 12-5, 14-3. Every time making the playoffs, and the last 2 seasons winning back-to-back Super Bowls. So Bill Belichick has 3 Super Bowls all time. And so that is really impressive, and he has never lost the Super Bowl. So that's where in real life he had already 3 Super Bowl appearances, but he also had the loss to the Giants. So I don't know which one's better. Would you rather have 4 Super Bowl appearances, winning 3, losing 1, or would you rather just have 3 Super Bowl appearances and being undefeated in the Super Bowl? So I guess that's a debate for the commentators. Next, we have the Denver Broncos. As you can see, Mike Shanahan is at the top. I've actually had more success with Mike Shanahan than in his real life, just in the sense of how many wins. I did also keep him an extra season, which is probably the reason why. Whereas he had a 61% win, I was 58%, but I do have more wins and I do have more losses too. And then Jim Fassel has his 2010 season where he went 5-12, and it was an abysmal year because Sam Bradford sucked. And so apparently there's a good chance that Jim Fassel will not be returning to Denver even after 1 year. John Elway is going to be a little bit more critical of this team, trying to get a more stable front office and coaching team, as Jim Fassel, although he's been very successful in my franchise as compared to his real life, he was not able to really make that switch to Denver as successful. Then for the San Diego Chargers, you can see Marty Schottenheimer had very little success in my franchise, whereas in real life he was 59% win. In mine, he was only 40%. He was 8-8, 6-10, 5-11, and it got to the point where I just had to fire him because he just wasn't winning anything. You had the Chiefs, who were also kind of shaky. They were with Dick LeBeau when they went 6-10, 8-8, and they had Dick Vermeil for 5-11. The Oakland Raiders made the playoffs the first 2 years, and that was 12-4 with Rich Gannon, and then 9-7 with Tuisa Sopo. So here you have this somewhat weak division. Even with Denver Denver kind of taking off early with Shanahan, but then kind of tampering off later. But Schottenheimer just never got anywhere. But then they hire Sean Payton. And Sean Payton, the Giants offensive coordinator, he is now a 67% win as a head coach all time. He is climbing his way up. Next year, he's going to be number 2. He's going to have a chance of being number 1 very shortly and being the greatest head coach in San Diego Chargers history. So very impressed with Sean Payton. And now given what is Sean Payton's success, is it Sean Payton, or is the fact that in 2005 they drafted Aaron Rodgers and he started right away? Yeah, probably that. But you have Marty Schottenheimer, who had Drew Brees and couldn't do anything with Brees. Now we'll move to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now this was one that in Madden 20, there weren't really many head coach options. So when Dick LeBeau was fired from the Bengals, I just brought him onto the Chiefs because it made sense. However, when I look at Dick LeBeau, I've always been wondering, when am I going to fire him? Because like Dick Vermeil had a 5-11 season. He wasn't great. But Dick LeBeau also is... I don't know. It's odd because he's had some good seasons and he's also had some bad seasons. And so, for example, his tenure as a coach was he went 6-10 and 8-8. And at that point, I went, he's on the hot seat. Then all of a sudden, he turned it around. He went 12-5, made the playoffs with Eli Manning, who was their 2005 number 1 overall pick. He was head coach of the year that year too. And I'm like, well, I can't fire this guy. Then he went 9-8, missed the playoffs. 8-9, missed the playoffs. 6-11, and I went, now he's back being on the hot seat. And what does he do the next year? He goes 10-7. So he gets, and then back to the playoffs. So and then he went 10-7 again once more, and he made the playoffs this past year. So I've kind of kept Dick LeBeau around because he has been quite moderately successful with the Chiefs. As you can see, he had a nice 69 wins, trying to trail and catch up to Marty Schottenheimer. I don't know if he's ever going to truly catch up. I mean, that's another 32 wins he's going to need. But actually, he could. I mean, he just needs to last a few more years. I don't know if I need a head coaching change at some point. But as you can see, the Chiefs coaches right now, I think, have been better than the Chiefs in real life because there's some stability you have with Dick LeBeau. Whereas you see Todd Haley and Herm Edwards. Dick Vermeil was good in real life. But then you see Andy Reid being their Roman Cornell was 2011, 2012. But Dick LeBeau is giving them stability, which is something that they didn't have during this 2000s up until they got Andy Reid. Now we go to the mess that is the Oakland Raiders. So the Raiders had Bill Callahan. Now in real life, Callahan made the Super Bowl, his 2002-2003 season. I did make the playoffs with him. So that's why I got that 34-31 record. But the following few seasons, he went 9-7, 8-8, 5-12, then 6. Then he got fired. And so in real life, Callahan was fired shortly after that season, right? 2003, he was gone. And so my Bill Callahan did more success than the other Callahan, with the exception of not making it to the Super Bowl. Then we look at like Dick Duron, who took over right afterwards. Now, Dick Duron was the Bears coach, and he did actually a very good job with Chicago with Rich Gannon, but they fired him because he kept losing in the first round of the playoffs. So Oakland thought, okay, great, we got Dick Duron, he's going to do great things for us, and he went 6-11 and 4-13. That 4-13 was fired him, and Mike Singletary came in as head coach. And so Singletary is 2008. He got Matt Ryan, which was a good addition, but Ryan has not done well in Oakland. He has struggled, as you would probably expect. It's pretty much a disaster franchise. But after just 2 seasons, 8-9 and 6-11, it was very clear that Matt Ryan was being wasted. And so the Raiders decided to sign Bobby Petrino, the Patriots OC, and Petrino will only give them 1 year. And Petrino did the letter thing and got out because Petrino's a prick, as we all know. And so he decided to leave them. So they are going to be in the search of a new head coach. But he went 7-10, which was better than the year before, but also not great. Oakland has a lot of work to do to figure out what direction they want this team to go. Then we have the NFC, the Chicago Bears. So as you can see, Dick Duron, who is significantly better in my franchise. In real life, he was out after 2003. In mine, he lasted till he joined the Oakland Raiders. And so here he is at 58-5. Very good season there. We see Johnny Lynn come in for replacing Dick Duron. And so Johnny Lynn was the defensive coordinator for the Giants when they were going to all those Super Bowls. And they had a very good defense. So Johnny Lynn had a few years as the Bears head coach, but he really wrecked it with Rich Gannon. He drafted Brady Quinn in 2007, and Brady Quinn obviously did not turn into anything. And so he went 8-9 with Rich Gannon. Then he went 6-11, and then 5-12. And of course, he then got fired. And so Bruce Arians has now become the head coach. And in Bruce's first year at 2009, he went 7-10, then 9-8 this past year, and made the playoffs. But Arians also drafted Mark Sanchez. So Sanchez's first year was not great, but then his second year, he got them to the playoffs. So Chicago, as you can see, they've had 3 different head coaches during my tenure. We'll see if Bruce Arians can become the all-time coach for them. I don't know if that's going to happen. Not because of Arians, but just because Chicago is in a tougher division. Now we're looking at the Detroit Lions. They've had a lot more head coaches. So, of course, you can see Marty Morningway. He was who I started with. He went 3-13 and 4-12. So not great. I could have kept him, as you can see, I could have fired him, 1 year earlier, like in real life. You can see Marty Morningway, 5-27 in real life. He was 9-39 in my franchise. A little bit better win percentage, but not much better. But then a miraculous miracle happened, and that was the signing of Chris Palmer. Now, if you don't know who Chris Palmer is, I don't blame you. But he had been a coach for the Cleveland Browns for a year, 2 years maybe. He was the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. And the Houston Texans won the 2003 Super Bowl. And David Carr, in my franchise, is quite good. He is actually living up to the number 1 overall pick, and he has been delivering. He's won a Super Bowl, just been really talented. And so I'm giving Chris Palmer the credit of David Carr's development. And so because Joey Harrington was the 3rd overall pick the same year Carr was, I felt that was a great connection where Chris Palmer worked magic with David Carr. Can Chris Palmer work magic with Joey Harrington? He didn't. He went 7-9, 7-10, 8-9. But then in that 2006 year is when he drafted Brodie Croyle. And Brodie Croyle went to the Chiefs in real life and never went anywhere. But in that season, there was Matthew Hasselbeck and Brodie Croyle. And Hasselbeck was like 0-6. He couldn't win a game. But then Croyle came in and turned the team around in 06. And that's how they went 8-9, because Croyle came in and won most of the games. And then after that, they went 10-7, 11-6, 11-6, 7-10. They made the playoffs 3 straight years with Brodie Croyle. They had Reggie Bush. They had a lot of good wide receivers. And so Chris Palmer right now is very close to being the Lions' all-time head coach in wins because of that great success. Next up, we have the Green Bay Packers. As you can see, Mike Sherman, my franchise, is 3rd all-time, where he's only 5th all-time in real life. Definitely more seasons with him, a few more seasons, actually, because Sherman was 12-4 his first year, made the playoffs. He had back-to-back 8-8 seasons. Then 10-7, made the playoffs. 10-7, missed the playoffs. 9-7-1, missed the playoffs. Then he went 3-14 before getting fired. That 3-14 season led to the hiring of Mike Tomlin and the drafting of Matthew Stafford. Now, Tomlin, I know, is a good coach, and he went 9-8 his first year with Matthew Stafford, but then last year went 3-14, which does have him on the hot seat. However, John Dorsey is still there. Mike Tomlin is still there. There is this desire to not make the same mistakes and move on from their other first-round pick. So, like, they had Jay Cutler, they drafted back in 2006, and he was supposed to replace Brett Favre. So kind of because Aaron Rodgers went like 3rd overall in 2005, Packers never had a shot at drafting that quarterback. So they did it the following year, and they got Jay Cutler to sit behind Favre and become the new Brett Favre. But as you know, Jay Cutler is no Brett Favre, or is no Aaron Rodgers. And so they ended up replacing Jay Cutler after 2 seasons because he went 3-14. And so since they went 9-7-1 with Cutler one year, 3-14 the next year, drafted Stafford, then they went 9-8 and then 3-14 again. I don't want to keep having the cycle of a good season followed by a 3-win season, fire everybody and try something new. So they're going to try to likely stick this out with Tomlin. But here you are, the Packers' all-time head coaches. Only 2 coaches I've used. I've tried to keep them stable as much as I can. Now we have the Minnesota Vikings. As you can see, they started off with Mike Tice. He's 24-25. Now I decided to cut the cord with him earlier because he went 10-6, 9-7, made the playoffs, then went 5-11. And I was like, you have Dante Culpepper, you have Randy Moss, you have all the tools available to you, and you just can't seem to win. And so he had about the same win percentage in my franchise as he did in real life. The Vikings in real life just gave him another year. And so despite all of that, I mean, Dante Culpepper has been the league MVP 4 times. He's been dynamic. And so Norv Turner took advantage of that. So as you can see, he was brought in 2005. And he is working his way with a 65% win percentage, which, other than Kevin O'Connell, who had 1 season as the Vikings head coach with 77% win, he's got the best winning percentage of any Vikings head coach. And every year Norv Turner has been coach of the Vikings, he has made the playoffs. And that is a very special feat. Right now they do have Brett Favre, which is good for them, but he didn't retire. However, when I transitioned from Madden 22 to Madden 24, I don't know if Favre will be in that roster. So I am basically ready for whatever result comes of it. But his record, I mean, Norv Turner's records have been 10-7, 10-7, 12-5, 13-4, 11-6, and 10-7. He did make the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots. But of course, if you watched the Super Bowl video, he lost in 2009 to the Patriots when they won their first Super Bowl in my franchise since I played in the last 9 seasons. But Turner did give the Vikings their first Super Bowl appearance. So that was a great accomplishment already. Then the Dallas Cowboys. Oh, whoa, the Dallas Cowboys. They have been one of the weakest teams in my franchise between them and the Cleveland Browns. Dave Campo went 4-12. He's out. Right, and as you can see, he did one win better in real life than my franchise. Then you have Bill Parcells, who came in, and in real life, Bill Parcells was pretty good in just those 4 seasons. Yeah, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so he was 34-30, 53% win. Whereas in my franchise, he went 5-10-1, 5-11, 5-12. He could not win more than 5 games a season. And that's not good. That didn't cut it. So, of course, Jerry Jones parted ways with Parcells. And then I brought in the coach who I thought was going to change Dallas forever, and that was John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh in 2006 drafted Vince Young as their quarterback. They had, in 2007, Adrian Peterson. It was some great picks. But Harbaugh went 6-11 with Vince Young alone. Then, in 2007, they went 12-5. Made the playoffs. Great year. And then the last 3 years, he went 7-10. Not being able to make the playoffs, not showing any growth. Dallas has been a decent team, but they haven't been a good team. And so he is also on the hot seat this offseason. Then we've got the Philadelphia Eagles. And right now, there is no reason why Andy Reid should ever be fired at this point, other than he hasn't won a Super Bowl for them. But Andy Reid has made the playoffs every year but one. His first season, he went 16-0. Made it to the Super Bowl, but then lost to the Buffalo Bills. Of course, he was the coach of the year that year. Then he went 13-3, 8-8, 11-6, all playoff seasons. Then in 2006 and 2007, he was 9-8, and they missed the playoffs. And that was the year that the Giants were just really, really good. Then he was 11-6, 11-6, 12-5, 12-5, making the playoffs every time. Donovan McNabb has been fantastic. The Eagles have the most wins of any team in my franchise in these past 9 years. So Andy Reid is doing it. He is racking up the wins. Now, he is very close to passing his real life wins with the Eagles, and he might do that a year early. Now, because again, I have 2 years to win 11 games with the Eagles to make Andy Reid tie it. I have a feeling I'm going to get that. As you can see, the losses are also significantly different. He has a 58% win in real life. I have a 65% win in my Madden franchise. Now we're up to the New York Giants. So the Giants in real life, of course, they got rid of Jim Fassel much earlier than I did. Jim Fassel was fired after 2003. Went 58-53. Then they brought in Tom Coughlin, who, as you know, won 2 Super Bowls. And he is the second all-time head coach in Giants history. Whereas my Jim Fassel is the second all-time winning coach with the New York Giants. He stayed there till 2009. 118 wins. 55% success. Now, Jim Fassel has been to the Super Bowl 3 times. One more than Tom Coughlin. However, Fassel has never won a Super Bowl. So what we see with his tenure, he was 9-7 in year 1, and he missed the playoffs with Kerry Collins. Then he went 10-6, and that was with Kerry Collins. They made the playoffs. Then in 2004, Kerry Collins was like, bye, and he left the Giants, and I believe he went to Cleveland right that year because that was when Bill Cowher became the coach of Cleveland. But then they drafted Matt Schaub, who I didn't think would have that great of a career here. But Matt Schaub has been a fantastic quarterback for the Giants up until they started to slug out. They went 10-6, 12-5, 11-6, 7-10, 8-9, 7-10 in the last years of Jim Fassel. Now, he made the Super Bowl back-to-back, lost both times to the Colts. So in real life, they won a Super Bowl. By this point, in this franchise, they haven't. The Giants did have Terrell Owens, which was a major success for Matt Schaub and for Jim Fassel. I think without Terrell Owens, their chances of getting the Super Bowl that many times and being that strong of a team would have been less. But even with Terrell Owens, they started to not tank, but they started to falter. So he got fired in 2009 after the 7-10 season. We have Jim Caldwell, who came in. They traded for Carson Palmer from the Cincinnati Bengals because Carson was like, I want out of here. I don't like Cincinnati. And so the Giants were looking for a step up above Schaub because Schaub could have continued as their quarterback. But Carson Palmer was a significant upgrade, so they got him. They went 11-6, and they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFC Championship game, or it would have been a New York Giants, New England Patriots Super Bowl. So there you have the Giants, Jim Caldwell getting his first year as head coach, and it was a very successful one, almost a Super Bowl winning journey. Now we have the Washington team, and as you can see, Washington, they've had quite the list of head coaches in their franchise history, and I haven't even started firing people yet. We started out there with Steve Spurrier from 02 to 03, and that's as far as he lasted, right? He went 8-8, 5-10-1. After that abysmal performance, they brought in Jack Del Rio, who was a good option, a Panthers defensive coordinator. He was just in the Super Bowl, even though his defense is the reason why they lost. But then Jack Del Rio took the reins, but only won 36%. Went 6-10, 6-11, 5-12, 10-7, 4-13, 5-12. I probably gave him more years than he should have. But that was mostly because he was, in fact, Jack Del Rio, and I wanted to give him a chance to turn it around. So the one year they went 10-7, they had Kellen Clemens, which is a very odd QB to come away with the starting position. He did all right for them, but then even later, they went for Michael Vick. And even with Michael Vick, they were unable to be successful. So Jack Del Rio's out, and so Marty Morningwake ended up coming to the Washington team. And the reason for that was because since Marty Morningwake was so successful with the Philadelphia Eagles, with Donovan McNabb, who is a mobile quarterback, it only made sense for this team to go with a coach who knows how to coach a mobile quarterback. And with Michael Vick, Marty Morningwake went 8-9 with Washington, which was their best season since 2007, which is when they made the 10-7 playoffs with Kellen Clemens. So as you can see, Marty Morningwake might actually have some success as a head coach in this league with Washington. But again, Jack Del Rio, Steve Spurrier, just not good. Morningwake, 47%. We'll see if he can get that up. Now we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, of course, they had John Gruden to start. But John Gruden, my franchise, may have been a fun coach in the sense of how he talked. Like he was a popular guy, a mouthy coach. But he didn't win a Super Bowl. So he never had the Super Bowl to back him up. And he made the playoffs twice in his career with me. And that's obviously not good enough. So when we had John Gruden, he went 9-7, made the playoffs that first year. Then he went 8-8, 7-9, then 9-8, and he made the playoffs again. He was with Kyle Bowler, which of course was not a major help. But then he got fired after a 6-11 season in 06-07, which brought in Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera has not had much success. However, if you look at his seasons, the Bucs have been steadily increasing every year. So they were 6-11, 6-11, back-to-back years. Then they were 8-9, 8-9. This year they went 9-8, but made a surprising run to the Super Bowl. They should not have made the Super Bowl, but they lucked out week 18, which got them in the playoffs, and then they had a last-second field goal in the wild card. They had a field goal win in overtime in the divisional round, and then they went and they won in overtime against the Giants in the NFC Championship game with a touchdown. So the Ron Rivera Buccaneers have steadily grown. They had Byron Leftwich last year, or in 2009, 2010. And then last season, they brought in Dante Culpepper, who was elevating them to a lot of good success. But then Culpepper got this major injury. And so I thought that injury might have doomed Ron Rivera to being fired. But then Byron Leftwich, who was not that great of a quarterback, was able to steady the ship. Darren McFadden was really the one who led the way. He's been a major spark as running back. Really helped this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team be successful. Then we've got the Atlanta Falcons. And after 2 years with Dan Reeves, and neither season going that great, 6-10, 4-12. They brought in Brad Childress, and Childress has been pretty good for them. He hasn't done very well in the playoffs, but he went 8-8, 9-8, 10-7, 8-9, 10-7, 12-5, 7-10. Made the playoffs 3 times. So he was brought in, of course, to coach Michael Vick, but Michael Vick just has this, hard time of staying healthy. And so they had to make a change. And what they decided to do was after the 2004-2005 season, where Vick only played 10 games, he was 4-6. Josh Harris, he might have been a late round rookie or even an undrafted rookie, went 3-2 with the team, and Cliff Kingsbury went 1-0. So I started to see success with the Atlanta Falcons without Michael Vick, and so did Brad Childress. And again, Childress, just like Marty Morningway with the Washington team, Childress was brought in because he worked with Donovan McNabb and was supposed to work well with Michael Vick. But in the first year without Michael Vick, they brought in A.J. Feely from the Eagles. And that was because Brad Childress knew A.J. Feely as the backup with the Eagles. And they went 9-8. A.J. Feely was a solid starter. The next year, the Falcons went 10-7 with A.J. Feely, and they made the playoffs. So this was blowing my mind because I did draft Jason Campbell in 2005 to potentially be the starting quarterback. But A.J. Feely just was winning so many games, I just kept A.J. Feely in. But then 2007, 2008 hit where they went 9-8, or 8-9, excuse me. And Feely was 1-3 as a starter, and Jason Campbell came in and was 7-6. Then Campbell went 10-7. Campbell went 12-5, which is when Campbell was like really good. I think he did make the Pro Bowl too. And then this past year he was only 7-10. So we'll see if Jason Campbell's able to keep it up as the starting quarterback for the Falcons, or if they should consider somebody else. But Brad Childress hasn't done anything really special in the sense of like a deep playoff run or an almost Super Bowl appearance, but he also hasn't been bad for them, and that stability has been really good for the Atlanta Falcons. And they've really built a strong defense to compete with the Panthers, who tend to be number 1. Then we have the Carolina Panthers, and they have been with John Fox from the beginning. I have not let him go yet. He is still one of the best head coaches in the league. He has won Head Coach of the Year 4 times, 4 out of 9 seasons. He has been the Head Coach of the Year, and so that is a 44% Head Coach of the Year percentage. He has made the NFC Championship game his second season, so year 1 was 9-7, missed the playoffs. And that was with Rodney Peete. Then he went 10-6, lost the Super Bowl to the Houston Texans. Then went 4-12, and that was awful. I was really upset with that season. They did not do well. All right, that was a really rough time. But despite that, they were 4-12. They were able to pick up. Let me see. I'm gonna double check here who they drafted that year. Let me double check. DeMarcus Ware. And from there, the Panthers started to really build their defense because of that small stint where they were 4-12 and 8-9. Because they also drafted 2 safeties. It was Michael Huff and the other name always slips my mind. Michael Huff and Daniel Manning in 2006. And that was a mistake. I didn't plan on getting Daniel Manning too. But because of that, they ended up creating the strongest safety duo in the entire league. And they've been number 1 defense for a long time. They went 3-14, 11-6, 13-4, 12-5, 14-3. They've had some crushing defeats in the playoffs, but John Fox has been just stellar as a head coach. Next, we've got the New Orleans Saints. The Saints here are, they started off with Jim Haslett, and he stayed till 2006 or 2005 technically, where he was 49-48. I mean, he made the playoffs twice, which was a shocker, with J.P. Losman as their quarterback. He was 5-11, 10-6, 9-7, 8-9. Those 2 middle seasons were when they went to the playoffs. They did trade in 2000 when Haslett was gone. They brought in Ron Meeks, who was the defensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts, and the Colts did really well, making the Super Bowl twice and winning 2 Super Bowls. And so Ron Meeks ended up getting the opportunity to, after they won the first Super Bowl, leave the Colts to go be a head coach. And Meeks just didn't cut it. He tried to get Drew Bledsoe to replace J.P. Losman, and he got him, but then went 7-10. They went 9-8, missed the playoffs, and went 5-12. After 3 years, Ron Meeks was canned, and so went 21-30. They brought in Josh McDaniels, who has not had actually anywhere near that success. He went 5-12 his first year. They had the number 1 overall pick and got Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow helped them win one more game. They were 6-11 last year. So Josh McDaniels, because there is some opportunity here with Tebow, we're going to see if we can play that out. He is still with the team with an 11-23 record. He is definitely entering a hot seat year because I don't think the Saints are going to put up with another 6-win season. Then we have the San Francisco 49ers. And of course, you see they have Steve Mariucci, who was the first head coach I worked with, and he lasted till 2005, which I think was maybe generous. He went 10-6 his first year, and that was with Jeff Garcia. But then Garcia left them, and they brought in Brad Johnson. They drafted Rex Grossman, but Rex Grossman kind of got the shaft because he never really got a chance to start. He was injured in preseason, which prohibited him from doing the 2003-2004 season. Brad Johnson took that season mostly. And so it was just a really weird situation. But Mariucci went 7-9 and 8-8, and then he got fired. So Tom Coughlin came in. And Coughlin in 2005-2006 traded for Drew Brees because Brees was going to be replaced by Aaron Rodgers in San Diego. And so Coughlin went 7-10, 6-11. Then had a breakout year where he went 12-5 with Drew Brees and won the Super Bowl. Then went 11-6, went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Steelers. Then he's been 6-11, 8-9. And I have a feeling that because he's went to back-to-back Super Bowls and won one, it's going to be hard for me to replace him no matter how bad he is. He's probably going to stay steady so long as Drew Brees stays steady. He is a 50-52 record. It's not the best record as a head coach here. I mean, kind of far from it. But he has a lot of potential. He has won them a Super Bowl, which San Francisco has not won since the 1990s. And so we have Coughlin working his way up, being one of the all-time coaches in my franchise with the 49ers. Now we move on to Arizona. As you can see, Dave McGinnis, he started out 4-12, then he went 9-7, then he went 7-9. And so I have to have two different graphics here because there are so many head coaches for the Cardinals. So I'm just going to show you mine right now because I gave you the little clip there of real life, and you can go back to it if you want. But what we have here is McGinnis went 20-37, so that was a pretty bad record. Then Romeo Crennel came in from the Patriots, and he tried to have Michael Vick be the guy. And as anyone who has had Michael Vick has had to face, he's not always healthy. His first year, he went 4-6 with Michael Vick because Trent Green was traded for because Michael Vick got hurt, and Green went 4-3. Then Michael Vick was 5-12, and he almost ran for 1,000 yards and almost had 9 touchdowns. But Michael Vick was just always getting hurt. Then they got Brett Favre from the Packers for 2007-2008 when he went 7-10. And on top of all of this, the Cardinals have had so much talent from Tony Gonzalez. They've had top wide receivers. They ended up, after Crennel got, he had Calvin Johnson Jr. his last season and couldn't do anything. They kept losing. So then they brought in Ken Wisenhunt, who was a real-life Cardinals coach. Went 6-11, 11-6, 6-11. He made the playoffs that one year. They brought in Phillip Rivers, who has become a solid quarterback for them. I don't know if it's because he's good or if it's because there's so much talent around him. But the Cardinals are just one of those really weird teams that have a lot of talent, kind of like the Cleveland Browns, but just can't find a way to win with that talent. Next, we have the St. Louis Rams. Mike Martz, he's been fantastic for me in my franchise. Whereas in reality, he only went to 2005, 62% win, which is a better percentage than my success with him. However, Mike Martz in my franchise is the all-time winning head coach for the Rams. He has a second NFC Championship appearance. So they lost to the Patriots in 2002. And that was before I started my franchise. And then they went to the playoffs, or the Super Bowl again, to face the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so they lost that one, but Mike Martz got him there, and that was with Kurt Warner. But ever since they moved on from Kurt Warner, they struggled as a team, right? So they had Kurt Warner, all the way up till 2007, 2008, because they brought in Tony Romo, thinking he could replace Kurt Warner. They also had Kyle Orton, who did have some starts. And then they brought in Kevin Kolb. They drafted Kolb, and Kolb didn't do any good for them. But then they finally traded for Jay Cutler when they fired Mike Martz and brought in Greg Williams, because Greg Williams wanted his own guy, and Cutler from the Packers went 8-6 after Romo went 1-2, and then they went 11-6 this past year. So Cutler under Greg Williams as head coach has been significantly better. As you can see, Greg has 59% win percentage with 20-14 record. He is a higher esteemed coach. I do plan on bounty gating him. I do plan on having that year that Peyton was out for the entire season. Greg Williams is going to have that scandal. So whatever he did these years, he was doing shady stuff. But Greg Williams has a Super Bowl win with Buffalo, which is one thing that gives him more credibility to be a head coach again. Then last team, we have the Seattle Seahawks. They were with Mike Holmgren for many years. They were 7-9, 13-3. That was the year he went to the playoffs and won Coach of the Year. Went 9-7. Then he went 2-15. And I thought I could have fired him after this year. And instead of going with Vince Young, they went with Mario Williams. And they also drafted Troy Polamalu. So they had a lot of stellar defensive players. But during that 2005 or 2006 draft, I went with Tavares Jackson with the first pick of the second round. And Jackson has been a better quarterback than Vince Young, than Matt Leinart. Jay Cutler borderline is challenging Jackson for being the best QB of that class. But then after that, they had David Garrard play instead of Tavares Jackson, went 9-7-1. Then Tavares Jackson went 7-9-1 to start of the following year. Mike Holmgren went 11-6, made the playoffs with Tavares Jackson, and then he ended up retiring. So Holmgren did not get fired in 2008. He just retired, which is real life retirement. So Greg Schiano came in to be the coach, went 7-10 with Tavares Jackson, and then let him go. And Jackson went to the Bengals. But then he went 9-8 with Derek Anderson, and then Vince Young was also on the roster, but Vince Young didn't really play. Anderson almost had them in the playoffs, but lost Week 18, which is how the Buccaneers slipped in there. So there you have it, the head coach history with my league. Hope you enjoyed this video. It was kind of long, but I wanted to give some analysis here before I head into who got canned and who is the new coaches heading into 2011-2012.